It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome, Celia Farber. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Isaac. Thank you. That was an incredible intro. Did you make that thing?
I didn't make it myself, but I hired a guy who's very cool to make it.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually used to have the speech from Mad Men, the carousel speech, but I kept getting YouTube like copyright infringement thing, so I had to just like do an original one. But
I'm sure you did. Well, nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for coming on. You know, you're. Let me just kind of intro you here. So you began as a culture journalist in the '80s for Spin,
and that's a good term for it.
Yeah, and you were kind of like what journalists should be, which is a questioner. You know, speak truth to power. You know, trying to get the real story of stuff. And as far as I understand it, you started writing about AIDS, which, of course, at that time was just the absolute number one thing everybody was talking about. And you started digging and you started finding some things that went against the accepted narrative. And in those days, Village Voice was writing about it a lot, and they were sort of criticizing Fauci even then. And there was this whole kind of battle over AZT and different treatments.
Yeah.
And you know, this is something to me, I completely missed. I didn't know any of this. I discovered you because I didn't. This is all like all the stuff about the guy who wrote like the letter to Fauci, like the public letter in the Village Voice. Like I didn't know any of that. So it's really fascinating. But I discovered you in RFK Jr.'s book, and he has a crazy respect for you and calls you out a bunch of times in that book, being like, you know, she was the only one of the only ones who was willing to tell the truth. And I know that you've had a really difficult time with being canceled in proto, and I'm sure being attacked in all kinds of ways. So the thing that I want to ask you first in listening to you and getting just a little bit of an understanding is, this is going to sound very charlatan Philistine-ish, so I'm sorry this is so simple, but what actually is AIDS? And what I mean by that is, I've heard you talk about it. You say it wasn't. We have this model that it's a viral little thing. We get the CGI and we see the bad guy. We see the bad circular thing that's invading you, and we have this notion that it's something that's just a virus that can be cured that way. But you say that in your research, you sort of discovered that model doesn't really track to what it actually is. So what is AIDS?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that from different eras, different decades, because let me first say something that might sound a little flaky, but I'll try to say it very lucidly. You know how there's this matrix equality to everything. So there's what we're experiencing in what we might call the real world, the actual physical, biological world. And then there's that place where the media bombardment, matrixy projection interacts with what we think we're experiencing. So AIDS has to be understood as totally taking place, like spinning in that matrix vortex, if that makes sense. So something happened, and then once that media machine got hold of it and started projecting it like a horror movie, like terror propaganda, it changed. So, and I'll tell you how it changed. Okay, so it begins when you said, could I define AIDS, or what is it? So first I have to say, what was it originally? and it was originally something in gay men. I would say the fast lane of very sexually active, receptive gay men in big cities in America. Late 70s, early 80s. Kaposi's sarcoma, these lesions, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. So it's basically a complex, and they named it right, an acquired immune system, let's say catastrophe. What then, by the time I started writing about it, it had become a social terror set off by a diagnostic test like COVID, right? So everybody thought, maybe I have it, maybe I got it last night, I'm going to die. My boyfriend used to be a heroin addict, et cetera. So everybody got kind of basketed in after the diagnostic test was invented, which is extremely unspecific and undiagnostic, but nevertheless, it got into the public's hands. And now everybody thinks they have AIDS, but that's not the same as the actual men in those cities who actually had the thing that it was named for. So do you see? So it went from being in real time, in real bodies, and real people who were really sick, to being a projected forward illness taking place mostly in your mind and this crazy diagnostic test.
I'm thinking that this hinges highly on the PCR test.
It wasn't PCR then. It was actually, they were called ELISA and Western blot, and PCR was not used for diagnostic purposes. It was used for, if gay men wanted to figure out how what was called viral, they added a feature called viral load with PCR and they did that, I want to say sometime in the 90s, I almost want to say late 90s. What they wanted was to disprove Peter Duesberg. So they put more high-tech mumbo jumbo in. So now we have a way that everyone can go measure their viral load with PCR. And now we can show that your viral load is, even if you feel fine, your viral, in other words, HIV test says yes or no, like a pregnancy test. But with viral load, they could mess with people so much more. Did it go up? Did it go down? Should we switch your meds? Blah, blah, blah. And that's where Carrie Mullis, inventor of PCR, comes in and says, don't you dare use PCR to tell people anything about anything. So that's where he comes in and defends Peter Duesberg and says, Gallo, you're a crook. You never proved HIV caused AIDS. Is this familiar? Any of
Yes,
this?
no, it is. It is. And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is the thing that people listening to this will say is, all right, well, when a woman in Africa tests positive for AIDS, what do you mean it's not what we say it is? And I think that what you're saying is the key misunderstanding is the test.
Everything hinges on, well, the whole, if you imagine it to be a very cruel magic trick, an elaborate magic performance or show, the whole thing, the whole deception hinges on the test and the intersection between how that test was branded to your work, branded so that people called up a whole range of catastrophic responses and hypochondria and fear of death. And we saw this in COVID too. I don't know what your experience was exactly of COVID, but you know, my father got the COVID. What do you mean he got the COVID? Well, he had trouble breathing. Well, could it be normal lung related things like everybody used to get? But as soon as they introduced COVID, nobody identified their normal symptoms with what they had experienced their whole lives anymore. They put it in this new lens and this new terror. So for this reason, the more time goes on, I have to say, more points to the matrix and less points to the being able to figure out what actually happened in anybody's body biologically with any of this stuff.
Right. And I think what the point you're making about COVID is that, and that was the PCR, right? That was sort of
Well, we were all
misused.
horrified. We who are still
Yeah.
alive, AIDS dissidents that don't tell us they're using PCR for this thing, and that was when we almost just you wanted to just go hide in a gin mill because you just knew. But they're so evil. Like, of course, that's how they're going to get the numbers up because they never could get the numbers up with HIV tests because they actually designed it to. They didn't get enough people in the net. With the PCR, you can do anything you want. You just turn the knob up, turn it down. It's
So what does that mean exactly? Why is that evil to use PCR for this COVID thing?
because, as its inventor, Carrie Mullis, made very clear in many, many interviews and writings, PCR cannot diagnose a viral infection. It is a needle in a hay. I'm just going to make it very in lay language, very simple. It's a needle in a haystack technology. So you prime it to go look for something. It can, for example, I'll use a true story first. The now dead president of Tanzania, former president of Tanzania, caught on to what Carrie Mullis had said in interviews, that PCR testing for so-called viral infections can never be diagnostic, it just isn't diagnostic. The way you diagnose, for example, a lung infection is to listen to the lungs. This is as far, it's not even a needle in a haystack. It's an absolutely it's so delicate and it's so manipulable. And as Fauci said in the beginning of COVID, that if you move the threshold up a little bit or down a little bit, you can completely change how many people in a given tested group are going to test positive or negative. So you could actually take somebody's blood and just move it. It's not a constant. Like, I'm going to come back to the pregnancy test. Doesn't change because it has a gold standard. You're either pregnant or you're not. The thing in your body that says you're pregnant, it's not going to change, and it's not manipulable. The former president the late president of Tanzania, he decided to test various objects for COVID PCR on the PCR test, and many of them turned up positive, like a goat, like a mango.
Oh, right. Yeah, right.
Control,
Yeah, the
meaning,
mango.
yeah. So I struggle to say exactly to translate all the sorcery around PCR, but suffice to say, here's how it winds up in the real world. Tons of people tested positive and didn't get sick, and vice versa. It didn't reflect the illness in human bodies. And again, like, what's evil about it is what's evil about the HIV test. To use something like that to tell people they have it is, I say it's evil because a diagnosis should happen with a doctor in a room with a patient, and the patient is checking all kinds of boxes, real symptoms in real time in real life, not staring at a diagnostic test and telling somebody they got something and they're going to get sick. So it's casting the illness in the future. And medicine was never like this, but this is where the colossal money is. The colossal money is in use the media, scare the bejesus out of the public, get them running to get tested, get them thinking they're sick before they're sick. And it's just like medicine going unhinged from everything it ever was before.
Yeah, so I did a couple years in pharma marketing, and we had this thing called unbranded campaigns. So an unbranded campaign is marketing the condition, right? So first you create the condition, and then later you do the branded campaign, which is the solution to the condition. And that's very common practice. That's what you do. You do an unbranded campaign first, raising awareness about this, molecule that can tell you whether or not you're going to die of breast cancer. And then, oh, by the way, here's the test, or here's the drug that is going to tell you about the molecule.
Believe it or not, Carrie Mullis, the inventor of PCR, even told me once in a completely different context. I had called him about, we were both involved in different ways with the O.J. Simpson trial. And Carrie even said, Celia, PCR is not even accurate for criminal forensics. He didn't say accurate. He actually said it is subjective in criminal forensics. And I said, you are kidding. I always thought at least it was super valid in criminal forensics, right? Like that's either somebody's blood or it isn't. But he said they actually, and I don't want to open this can of worms necessarily, but PCR was invented by a good man he was brilliant, he was funny, he was for truth and decency and human life, Carrie Mullis. But it was really a genie out of a bottle kind of hellscape that came out of his innocent invention that just was in his brain one day when he was driving. It's not his fault.
Do you know anything about how it works, like how a PCR works? I don't either. I know. This isn't like a gotcha question. I have no idea.
There are you people who will geek out about that so happily and so much better than I can. I'll send them.
No, okay. It's okay. I mean, I think the bottom line here, the point you're making is the guy who invented it was extremely against it being used for these methods. Right?
He never wanted it to be used to tell anybody you're sick because we found this. He always said, it can't tell you whether you're going to get sick or not get sick or whether you're going to live or whether you're not going to live. He said that was an absolute perversion of PCR. But when they got a hold of it, they put PCR in every single lab and it just became the everything. It became the gospel of diagnostic medicine. And this is a real tragedy, real catastrophe, I would say. Very, very, very dark turn. Away from, now think of where's society going. It's going to AI, it's going to transhuman, everything is like away from human intelligence and into machine intelligence. So this is just more going into the Borg.
Yeah, I like the Borg. I like the word Borg. I've adopted the word Borg, and I like saying it. Which is funny because there's also the blob. There's the blob and the Borg, and it's
the
like,
blob.
What's
the blob? The blob. That's Mike Benn's creature.
Right. Yeah.
And I have a creature. That I call the anaconda, which is Catherine Austin Fitts calls Mr. Global. So the anaconda I borrowed from a Soviet dissident you may be familiar with called Vladimir Bukovsky, who I interviewed shortly before he died. And his use of the anaconda was he meant communism.
Right.
In his case, specifically Soviet communism. That's what he called the anaconda. So I just like how it sounds, the anaconda.
Yeah, the anaconda. It's kind of like the Leviathan also, right? It's a sort of similar... Yeah.
I think blob sounds too blobby. Sounds like a blob. Like
it's too friendly.
Like it's laying around being a blob.
It's really not that scary. It's just a blob. Yeah. You actually said, speaking of blob, you said you think that, and this was, I listened to a podcast from before the election. You said that RFK Jr. might be able to beat back the blob. If he's elected, and then he did get elected. I mean, not elected, but close. So, do you think that's? Do you think he's going to be able to do anything against the blob/Borg?
Wow, that's an excellent and difficult question. Can we break it down a little bit?
Yeah, by all means.
Because I think he's already done so much damage to the blob, to the beast. But not by dismantling its like parts and corpus and it's, putting it in jail. He delivered such a body punch to the myth, the Fauci myth, and it begins to crackle and crumble and everyone starts reading this book. And now he goes on. So he created a culturescape where Fauci's reflection comes out like all of us knew Fauci was for many, many years. But But the myth of Fauci, which was created by AIDS activists, I'm going to say that again, the myth of Fauci was created by AIDS activists who were revered and worshipped, like ACT UP, and it was untouchable until RFK Jr. So I think the freedom for people happens first in the, I don't know, culture is an overused word. It doesn't happen when, like, we padlock, the CDC and arrest everybody. Those fantasies don't come true, but he changed things so dramatically, even without and before the presidential run. And that now, so now he's in there, and I don't know much about, it's been a while since I spoke to him. I certainly don't text him anymore. And I'm going to try to find out if anybody I know knows anything, but the sense I get just from watching him and what I know of him, of course, he's walking all kinds of lines. And it seems like the enemy has not quite decided, are they really going to keep trying to destroy him, or are they going to make peace with him? There was a very interesting clip where the whole staff of HHS came out day one and gave him a standing ovation. He gave a talk. I don't know if you saw that clip. Standing ovation.
No, yeah. That's
HHS staff.
Wow.
And they came up to him and they hugged him and they shook his hand. They said, we have been waiting for you because science has been shackled. So scientists are suffering. They're not all evil by any means. They're not all, trying to kill people with their potions and corrupt science. They're also, like all people in a totalitarian system, they're suffering too. So I guess he's like we need to think of a Soviet leader who, there kind of aren't any. They were all corrupt, but in the West, people believed it was, Gorbachev or whatever, or that comes along and everyone thinks, oh, wow, we're going to have freedom now. That seems to be how they feel about him at the HHS. But that's not really what you asked. You asked, will he, ask me the question again, but specifically, will he achieve what?
Well, I think you said beat back the blob. I mean, is he going to be able to,
I probably said that knowing me.
I'm
I'm probably a little less optimistic now than I was then.
Really? Okay. So why less so?
It's weird, I'm sort of like a battered wife in that despite all these decades with these people, I still forget how abusive and wicked and evil they are, that they will, like, for example, they've been running this measles op.
Yeah, well, I was just going to mention that actually. Like,
And
you need
so
to get
it's sort of
retested for measles, right?
Bobby, Bobby Kennedy, he's doing this, he's doing that. We're ready, Maha. We don't want to poison our kids anymore. We don't want to poison our food anymore. Everybody's ready. And then I see this thing. It's like they have a dead child. They have a dead child, and they're throwing the dead child at him. And that is exactly what they do. And they can do it with one dead child, and the child, according to a story I cross-posted by a Dr. Ely, I believe his name is, said that he was in contact with the parents, and the child didn't go in for measles and was not diagnosed with measles, i.e. did not die of measles.
Right.
So in other words, the ops are coming in heavy. Right. And the ops are the ops are the ops, are the blob, are the anaconda, are the perpetual blockage. Will that stop? Well, that will only stop when everything changes. Right. Nothing can change that until the matrix.
Well, right. It's kind of like, as long as there is a profit motive that's that huge, right? And not to sound like a communist, but as long as there's not just a profit motive, but a profit motive to the degree of almost trillions of dollars, right? If you can
definitely trillions.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's never going to stop, really, because somebody's always going to chase after that. It's almost like a systemic problem, kind of.
Yes, once they discovered how much money they could make by
Yeah.
making healthy people think they're sick and
Yeah.
making parents think they have to inject complex poisons and even mRNA into their children in order for their children not to die. You see, it doesn't stop. It's like,
Yeah.
my child needs what? And they know what they're tapping into. Every mother's thinking, just tell me, doctor, what do I have to do? I want my baby to be like, it's such a manipulable field in a mother's mind and
Absolutely. It
father.
is right. Well,
And
and in
so
anybody's mind,
always
right?
milk that to,
Yeah.
to infinity, right?
Right. As long as they can do it. Yeah. The thing I've been seeing recently, or semi recently, is what will happen now, and this is sort of a perfect piece of Bernaysian propaganda, is the Wall Street Journal or somebody, or some sort of struggling digital media company that you've heard of, like Forbes or something like that, will publish an article by someone that is like a fear-mongering, unbranded campaign about some plague. So it'll be like, this. What did they just made one of these up that suddenly everybody knows. What's the air one? It's a respiratory something that now everybody says they have RSR or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
RSV something.
RSV. Yeah. Suddenly everybody has RSV. I've never heard the word RSV one single time before 2 years ago. And now every time somebody says, oh yeah, it's probably RSV. It's like, where are you getting this? So what happens is a publicity company gets Forbes to write the article. Then Forbes posts the article, and then they pay to run the fear-mongering article about RSV, whatever it is. You probably have RSV. They run that as an ad. And then not only does Forbes make money, but then who's ever offering the RSV test also makes money. So it's literally complete mind control, fear-mongering insanity.
What is the word for that? It's beyond racketeering, right? What is it called when they do that? Is that racketeering? In terms of just simple criminal linguistics, like what is that called?
Racketeering, when it's like a,
what is racketeering? But anyway,
it's kind of racketeering. Yeah, I don't even really know.
This
Yeah,
is
racketeering.
Exactly how it works. But then, right. So you know a lot about this. I'd actually love to be able to, talk to you about all these features of it from the inside, because I've only experienced it from the suffering outside, but outside the box, and you've experienced it from the inside. So you're in on their secrets.
Yeah,
but
a little bit.
This business of the article being an ad, I do know what you mean. Like it reads, because their writing reads like advertisement anyway, even when it isn't an advertisement.
They literally run it as an ad on Twitter. So they paid to boost it. And it does marketing both for Forbes, because you can't click away, because now you have some disease that you need to read about. So you go and subscribe to Forbes to get the full article. And the people who put the thing in Forbes, the medical company, it's also an ad for them. So everybody wins. It's like the perfect
except the poor
racketeer.
person
Exactly.
is being I think this should be absolutely illegal. This is blob. If we're talking about what we're talking about right now, what Bobby Kennedy's confronting and what we're all trying to survive, this is the blob. And the blob is that the simulation machine around media simulated illnesses that aren't illnesses. They're not classical illnesses. There really aren't new illnesses. There aren't new illnesses. Think about that for a minute.
So what do you mean by that exactly?
There aren't new, symptomology. Symptoms come from, so diseases are caused by combinations of toxins and nutritional deficiencies and or stress and or sanitation issues. So those things happening in combination. There aren't new viruses that come from far-flung parts of the world and suddenly produce in the human body brand new diseases every time Bill Gates turns up at Davos. Like they're generating this all the time, and we know it, but we get insecure.
But what about like the lab? What about the, the lab in Wuhan? Is that real? Like, aren't they actually trying
So,
to do
if we're
stuff?
talking about something that humanity was hit with, that there's no, okay, so I don't think that SARS-CoV-2 exists. I don't think it leaked from any lab. I think that's a huge psyop. I think personally that the illness was generated by the situation, the COVID was mostly generated by the simulation, by people thinking they were sick when they weren't. But I also think it's possible that it was a frequency assault that they did, that was a electromagnetic 5G concentrated assault in parts of New York and that was what had happened there in Wuhan, where they had, that they rolled out the biggest 5G blast. But also those people that like, we'd have no idea what people got sick of in Wuhan, China, now or ever. The whole thing to break down is I'm watching television about people getting sick, and in my brain it's happening just like a child can be told about a monster and believe them. I keep coming back to this. That's the interface to break down the propaganda, but it's not propaganda. It's something, it's like MK Ultra meets monarch mind control meets propaganda meets abuse meets, do you see what I'm saying? Like meets $2 trillion of, they study, as you know, they study our minds, right? They study what our fears, they study all this. And so if you're asking me, I think the question should be, was it possible to determine who had flu and who had a new thing after the blob does its thing in the media, kicks it off in 2020? No, I don't think it's possible to separate anything anymore after that.
Right, and you saw that in the numbers, right? I mean, that was very odd. Anybody who actually looks at those numbers, the flu suddenly goes down to nothing, and then COVID suddenly goes up. So that I agree with. The part that I don't know if I'm ready to accept is that there is no because I know that it's the territory theory versus the germ theory, right?
Yeah.
So it's like territory theory says everything is, there's no such thing. I don't really know. I'm saying the way that I understand it is.
Let's be careful. There's no such thing. That terrain theory says there's no such thing as one single deadly organism that a person picks up that fells and kills a healthy person.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Let's not simplify.
Well, maybe you can tell us what is there's that, I should pull it up, but tell us what terrain theory is.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to get the real terrain theory super geniuses angry at me if I say it wrong, but I can say it simply. So terrain theory is that illness is caused by exactly what it sounds like, the terrain, everything, the air you breathe, the food you eat, the soil your food is grown in, the quality of the water you drink.
There's this thing. Remember, it's germ theory, terrain theory, vaccinate the fish, clean the tank. Yeah, there was this. I remember this.
Precisely. So it's simply that, and it can get much more advanced than that. But there are a lot of people who are doing fantastic work about the whole how germ theory and virology and single virus theory, and again, none of it's possible without the blob of mass media in modern times. Because let me go back to AIDS for a minute. They guarded the single virus Gallo unproven model of AIDS so ferociously. They did not allow for any cofactor. Can you imagine looking at an illness that was occurring in gay men who, by their own admission, people like Michael, you don't know these names necessarily, but Michael Callan, like gay men who I knew was very good friends with, who were very promiscuous and wrote about it to try to stop AIDS. They wrote these pamphlets. We know who we are. We know why we're getting sick. We know what we do every night. We know why we're getting sick. We know the heterosexuals are not going to get sick like we're getting sick. We know what the difference is. It was actually Larry Kramer that put a stop to that and said, no, we're not going back to people, hostility against gay men, homophobia. We're not going back before Stonewall. We're going to go with single virus. Anybody could get it. There's nothing that you did that was in your lifestyle, your terrain, if you will. Now, what were they doing? Well, they were bringing together the following combinations of threats to their biology. It was multiple, this might be one of the first things, and this is hard to talk about, but multiple exposures to seminal fluid from another person is by itself every single time a belt to your a shot to like a weakening of your immune system. Pretty significant, because it's a foreign antigen and your body kind of goes. Okay, so there's that. There was repeated lots and lots of drugs. So we're talking, cocaine, methamphetamine, all the usual stuff. So stimulative drugs, hard narcotic drugs.
Yeah, you talked about poppers.
Poppers.
Right? Poppers.
Poppers.
So yeah. So what are tell us?
Sleep, bad food, right? Like it all crashes. Plus one that's anyway douching that like remove the flora. I mean, it's a marvel that they didn't get sicker faster sooner, because they were pretty strong young guys. But I also think it's possible that there was some kind of biological weapon of some sort. It could have been the hepatitis B vaccine, something that came in that wasn't just lots of drugs, lots of sex, poppers, antibiotics. So that wasn't the multifactorial model only. I don't think anyone really figured it out completely. Duisberg challenged it. So Gallo puts forth the ludicrous fairy tale about HIV single cause of AIDS. Duisberg challenges it, says HIV is harmless. Then come the multifactorialists like Robert Root Bernstein, different people saying it's a multitude of factors. And Duisberg just said, multifactorial, that's just a muddle and a mush. At the end of the day, after this massive war and all these people destroyed, their careers destroyed, some people I think bumped off without a doubt. And it didn't wind up anywhere except that we were crushed and silenced. In 2008, our movement was over. And they had triumphed in the blob media that we were dangerous, discredited, thoroughly wrong, had killed people, and essentially we had to just surrender.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, and this is something that it's so dark that, when I was listening to you on the podcast talking about this, it's like you're even thinking about this, you're sort of overwhelmed with this just sense of evil, And what you're basically saying is that this group of people was treating their bodies so insanely poorly that they basically got like a chronic condition from it in some way, right? That was multifactorial, which actually makes a lot of sense, right? Versus that somebody banged a monkey and suddenly there's that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It's an insane story. And the whole thing about the flight attendant, it was a fiction. Randy Schultz's book was fiction.
Sure. Yeah. And people like to think of it that way, right? They like to think it's because it simplifies it. They like to think it's just this bug that is in your body, and it's really never that simple, is it? Right? Like when you get sick, it's really never that simple.
It's a complete and utter vicious. I want to say fiction. It's worse than fiction, like vicious mythology. I don't know how to call it. Dangerous. Like as soon as you can create a whole field of all these people, Bill Gates and writers like, who wasn't a writer, she's, you know, counseling for Laurie Garrett, what was that? There were all these books that came out, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, and it was all like words like emerging, like emerging plagues, emerging, and everyone believed it. Everyone believed it because they kept telling the story, telling the story, telling the story. And then if you doubted it, like we AIDS dissidents did, we didn't just doubt it, you know, we attacked it over and over. But they made sure that we were so despised in the culture, in the media, in our professions, that people saw and understood that's a really bad thing to question. It's a bad thing to do. I don't want to be bad. I don't want to be bad. I want to live. I want to, and that's really how they do it.
It's like the pre-cancellation cancellation. This was like, you know, this was the original cancel culture in a way, in America at least.
Yeah, and I feel like actually they despised us even more than they were despising anti-vaxxers when COVID came around. Because there was more of a, anti-vaxxers were despised, but because we were few, we were like fish in a barrel. They knew each of us by name, and like they put me up on this thing, blood splattered on my face. They had like voodoo campaigns against, and it was very hard to just survive. I mean, I saw and lived through, you can bully a person to death through, it's like high-tech voodoo.
Yeah. So what other kind of stuff did you experience from, in terms of them coming after you, like over the years?
So the most significant, when I was really taken out, was after I wrote a piece in Harper's in 2006, or it came out in 2006. It was 2 years in the making, and it was it took us 2 years to put it all together, 4 months to fact check it. I had a whistleblower who brought out documents from inside Fauci's NIAID. So it was a very hardcore expose of Anthony Fauci's apparatus and the crimes that were going. It opens with the murder of a pregnant woman in Memphis, Tennessee, and they know she's dying of this anti-HIV drug, and they don't take her off the drug. So it gets into serious heart of darkness stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just accidents in medicine. It's I brought out the dark underbelly of AIDS culture and Fauci's diet. Okay. So they went so nuclear, so ballistic when that piece came out. It only took them a few days. They constructed a missile piece to attack me with, which was called 56 Errors in Harper's article. And that thing was constructed in South Africa by, I mean, these are military contracted pharmaceutical AIDS activists, okay? Right. Transnational. And it was seeded all through international media. Not that Fauci's people had killed a pregnant woman and then killed all these other people in another Uganda trial I got into, but rather Harper's had lost its mind. Harper's had published an AIDS denialist. And then all the stories were about how the AIDS gang felt about that, and they were devastated and disappointed and felt betrayed by Harper's, and and it was all about their emotions, like these privileged people of the AIDS, royal court sitting around, and everyone was interviewing them how despairing they were about this article. So they flipped it completely, the focus of it. And I wound up, it was relentless attacks, battery, and then they started with the really sick stuff, with the blood splattered photo on this website. They created a whole website just to attack me. That's where the blood splattered photo hung. That was done by an AIDS researcher who I think they're military contractors at Johns Hopkins, who his whole job was attacking us. And he would put in writing, "We will crush you, each and every one of you will crush." These people are like cartoon demons, cartoon villains.
Well, and it's also just like for everybody listening to this who's like, It's just when somebody is really crazy, do people ever get this vicious towards them? No. Like, obviously, of course, you were saying something that was at least partially true and at least partially worth saying, because otherwise, they wouldn't react this way. If the people who say really crazy stuff that has no truth, nobody goes after them. So obviously, you were onto something.
That's a really good point. I want to ask you something in your circles.
Yeah.
Do you feel that people are becoming more aware that virus theory and media driven fake pandemics are sinister and false and dangerous?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, COVID was massive for people's minds, and they lost a lot of adherence. I mean, I think a big reason why Trump won was because of COVID, because it was just so obviously wrong. Everything they were telling us was wrong. And
Well,
I think that, yeah.
And you knew that.
I knew. Oh yeah, I knew it. I mean, I spent about 1 week. I remember when it first came out. I was like, it's nothing. Everybody freaks out. My job that I was at closes down. We're all working remotely. I'm living in downtown LA. I went out of my house, literally in like a hazmat suit, not almost a hazmat suit, like thing all on my face, gloves, hat. I was like walking around, like seeing what was around. Everything was closed. And I spent about, I remember we wiped down our groceries, we like disinfected our groceries. But I spent about 1 week doing that. And then I started looking into it, and I started reading it and reading, the disagreements from actual real, like doctors. Some doctors in those days they weren't afraid yet. So they were like raising obvious questions. And I was like, okay, this is not at all what they're saying it is. And so then I just went about my business basically. And I got it. I was like I was pretty much the first person I know who got it, because I just stopped caring about it. So I got it on a plane, and of course was all obsessive about it. Yada 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 yada. I was sick for a half of a day, and then it went away. And it was just some.
I'm sorry. I have to ask you this.
No, yeah.
What was the it that you got? And I'm
Right.
not challenging that you got an it,
No.
and maybe it was unlike any flu you ever had. But I just want to hear precisely as you can, what was it? Because you said you had it for half a day.
I was sick for like a day. Yeah, I was sick for
So
a day,
why
and I
is that-
tested
Why is
positive
that
for it.
COVID? Like, what makes that
right.
COVID?
No, you're totally right. And there was
For you,
nothing really
you know
about
how
it.
sick you've been before in your life. You know what that felt like. So for you, why was
Wait.
it COVID
Yes.
and not flu?
Well, just because of the test. The only reason I'm saying, that's why I'm saying I got it. I kind of tend to agree with you that I feel like if you look at the numbers of this, the thing that they're testing for with the PCR probably could be a range of viruses or whatever this genetic material that gets in you is. Probably a ton of people were testing positive for this thing when it wasn't even real, even if it's real at all, I mean, I'm a little bit more on the middle of things in terms of germ theory, but I definitely, all the people that were saying that they lost their taste, I never bought that. I don't think anybody ever lost their taste. I know that people say that, but losing taste, it's one of those things that's like, well, did you or did it's so completely impossible to prove.
Yeah. It's subjective,
Yeah,
right.
and so I felt I felt like I had a flu for 2 days. A day basically, like one day. I felt really bad, really cracky, sweats. Laying in bed. You know how you are when you get sick. Like you get this. You can't sleep. Your body aches. I got all that for about one day, and then I was fine.
Yeah. Okay,
So
this is
yeah, who
very
knows?
interesting because we're in it right now. We're spinning in it right now. That you're telling me that you got it, and we're trying to ferret out what did you have, what did you get? Because honestly, I feel like most people. I was expecting you to say I was sicker than I've ever been in my life.
No.
Sick as a dog, couldn't breathe, Because I feel like there was that version of the it. So I'm agnostic. Was there an it? Was there a new or? But to hear you say that, it suggests to me the mind control is primarily where the it happens.
You know what I think the it is? I think the it is airplanes.
Oh, no kidding.
That's what
Absolutely.
I think the it is, because that's when I got it. I flew for business,
So that's
and
terrain.
suddenly I had it. And the other time that I got really, really sick, well, this time I didn't get really, really sick, but I just tested positive for it. But the other time I had one of these exotic diseases, I got swine flu, coming in a very long flight, a 14-hour flight, and that was the sickest I've ever been. And you know what's really funny though? At that time, my doctor said to me, he was like, I was like, do you need to test me for swine flu? And he was just like, no, you have swine flu. And he was basically saying what you're saying, which is like, if you have these symptoms, you have swine flu. If you flew on the airplane, you have swine flu. And I really do believe when you're stuck in one of these like fart tubes for 14 hours, breathing in everybody else's like disgusting, germs and stuff, or not germs, whatever.
No, I know. Yeah.
That makes you sick, and I think that that's really what was making people
I
sick. Was
agree with
flying.
that. I rarely get sick, but if I'm going to get sick, it'll be when I've flown.
Yeah.
But another thing that also fits the other part of terrain theory, that there's also an enormous electromagnetic pollution. Like you get an electromagnetic assault when you fly, and you get another hit when you go through the, what's it called in the airport? The X-ray. No, what's
The
it called
X-ray thing.
that you walk through? Yeah, those, because they make those. They're very powerful now, much more than they. So start to think in terms of electromagnetism as a cause of illness.
Well, but
And
okay. So can I?
The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who just passed away. Rest in peace, Arthur Furstenberg. What a great, The Invisible Rainbow. It's about how electricity and electromagnetism and radio and frequencies and all these inventions, but primarily electricity, it maps exactly with pandemics.
So can I ask you just like a very journalisty question, which is, hey, we got to be, we're good journalists. We got to be, asking these sort of pressing,
Absolutely.
attacky. It's not attacky, but my question about the electromagnetics, and also like you look at RFK Jr. and you've talked about taking the methylene blue, right? I actually have. I tried it. I have some right here. I have some methylene blue. We're frozen for some reason, but yeah, I have methylene blue right here. I tried it, and the electromagnetics. Oh, the kind of issue I have with that, or look, no issue, but the question I have about that is, isn't that kind of transference? Like, aren't we transferring the germ theory plus the antibiotic for the electromagnetic field and the methylene blue?
Oh, yeah, that's very
You know?
interesting. Okay, so you're saying, right. So I am not sure where I stand on methylene blue. Do you know there are two sides to methylene blue?
No,
Maybe
what's
three.
the?
Well, one probably says, the Orthodox people probably say it's all snake oil, but the one side swears by it and the other side says it damages gut bacteria and you shouldn't take it for that reason. So I actually stopped taking it, but I used to love it. But anyway, there's a doctor called Dr. Sabine Hazan who measured gut bacteria and found that people who had taken methylene blue didn't have proper gut bacteria. Anyway, don't worry about that right now.
Well, it is like a dye. I mean, it is like a,
It's a little weird, yeah.
yeah.
It's that's an interesting one, methylene blue. But okay, so here's what I'm hearing you say is, aren't we just finding new ways to have big elaborate discussions about why we're getting sick, but we're just throwing out viruses? Is that what you're saying?
Well, or aren't we just kind of finding a new virus that
That's what
just
yeah.
has a different name, right? Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to get hurt by electromagnetism.
Yeah, right.
Get hurt by Wi-Fi, and I'm going to get hurt by
Yeah.
That's, so you're saying we're still in it, like the sort of obsession about health and hypochondria kind of thing?
Yeah, we're just like we're in a good sense, we're disempowering the blob or the Borg from delivering us these fake cures, right, with these fake diseases, which I absolutely agree with. But we're kind of replacing it with our own indie version, which is, like it's the indie disease is the electromagnetics kind of in a way. Again, just a question.
Well,
I have no.
as somebody who spent many years very chronically ill with syndrome X, Lyme, chronic fatigue, I had it all. I'm mercury and detoxing and it took me more than 12 years to go from, I was incapacitated, right? So I don't know, and I'll never know exactly what brought me that low, but if I had to say something, I would actually say trauma, the trauma of what went through.
Well, I mean, the weight of what you were carrying was so immense. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and it picked up on like pre-existing traumas from childhood and stuff. So I think that if I could introduce another reason why we're all, for me, that's kind of the bell I'm always ringing. Trauma.
Well, and that feels the most accurate to me. I mean, the trauma seems like that does make the most sense in a way, right? I mean, because that's not a superficial reason. That's not something coming from the outside. That's like something that's in you, right?
Here's what I completely agree with you. It's interesting. You're helping me crystallize what I really think about this. And I've been thinking about this some time ago. Terrain theory is materialist.
Right.
And I'm against materialism in medicine or science. I'm against materialism because I don't think we are material beings. I think there's so many things so what I mean by that is to endlessly sit around and tinker with every single thing. It's still being a materialist, if that makes sense, as opposed to finding how to, I don't want to sound flaky, but like I read the Bible, I read the New Testament and what Jesus was doing. And he was curing people of very serious illness. And that's what he does. And nobody's asking like what's going on there. I don't want to turn the conversation to this, but
no, it's fine.
But I'm trying to say that we're all trapped under this yoke, if that's the word, of like, and as you say, I'm indie. I'm going to go over here and say that I got sick from Wi-Fi, and you're like an idiot, and you're a Davos idiot, and you think everybody is getting viruses. You make a lot more money than I do, but both sides of it are kind of, we're only bags of cells that we don't really understand, but we're still going to obsess about it. And it misses something about the spiritual. There's another word I want. I'll tell you what I really think. What Jesus is doing in the Bible is he's offering a frequency that we only have a word for that isn't necessarily the right word, but the word we have is love, for that frequency that is the healing frequency. Like if people could achieve that frequency, I believe they could heal fast.
Wow. That's well, so your dad was Jewish. He was a pretty famous Jewish radio guy, conservative. So were you raised Jewish, or did you find Christianity later?
I didn't grow up with my father. I grew up with my mother in Sweden.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they split up when I was 3. They had a very, very combative divorce, which culminated with my mother taking us to Sweden. So I was not raised Jewish. And I became, with my father's, I reconnected with him as an adult, and we talked about it a lot, and he was very open to it. I had his full blessing. He was not one of those Jewish fathers who enforced or pushed Judaism on me. He would go to temple on high holy days, and he was very Zionist, very pro-Israel. He died in 2020, so I never had a chance to really talk to him about about all of that. I just sort of heard what he said and what he thought and understood his worldview. But his Judaism was, like most Reform Jews, it was not really, it was not really well. It, he believed in God, but it's an interesting question. What is there for Reform Jews to really do with their? So all he knew was he figured it out by himself that I'm not showing gratitude to God, so I'm going to start to pray. And he actually prayed for 2 whole hours every single morning before he got out of bed.
Whoa! Like reading prayers, or just sort of personal?
He did he actually was laying down in bed, but he was asking for protection for every single person, for all of us, giving thanks, remembering everything to give thanks for. So it was like a sort of, it was his own self-made form of prayer, you might say.
Wow, that is very cool. Yeah, so you have a great quote from him about journalism, where you asked him what journalism means, because he was also a journalist, and I think he said, penetrate the ostensible.
Yeah, he said, I can sum it up in 3 words for you. And I was like, 3 words? He said, penetrate the ostensible. And
okay, went, so what does he mean? Cool. What does that mean? What does he mean by that?
So go behind the official story, go behind the curtain, right? Penetrate. Let's think of a recent example.
Well, you're doing it on your Substack. I mean, I think your Substack is you talk about all kinds of different things, but I feel like you're always penetrating the ostensible, right? I mean, it seems like every story you're kind of like going beyond the curtain.
Yeah, maybe it's becoming like pathological, but I because I'm trying to figure out. I don't think the Blob lies about some things, but I don't think they lie about everything either. In other words, it's not quite that they tell the truth and there's some interconnected algorithm to how they do it. I don't know if you agree with me, but let's try to think of a big media story that nobody thinks is not true.
That nobody thinks is not true, that just everybody agrees with? That's hard.
Yeah. That like we all agree, oh, that's totally true. Nobody has an issue with that. It's not much left.
It's really hard. That everybody thinks of as real. I don't know. Is it? Yeah.
Okay, so there's big ones like JFK, moon landing.
Right.
AIDS is the pretty unfortunate one I got stuck in.
Mm-hmm.
What are the other major ones? Well, there's Flat Earth and all that.
9/11.
Oh, 9/11.
Yeah, there's a big one. But a lot of people are truthers on that, that's for sure. That's got a big questioner.
I feel like they flipped it, because it's actually, if you look at, I'll just stick to my own little turf here. If you look at what Gallo had when he put those 4 papers in the foundation, when he stood before the cameras, I have found the cause of AIDS. If you actually look at it, it's crazy to think that he had found the cause of AIDS. It's crazy because there less than 40, something like 36% of Gallo's original samples were positive for the thing he was saying was the cause of AIDS. Then, okay, but and there's a lot more I could go into. So what they say is like, oh, you people are crazy and ragged and dangerous. What they were believing was actually the crazy thing to believe. Just like I think it's crazy to believe in the single bullet theory with JFK. Like, it's crazy to not understand who Vincent how do you say his name?
Bugliosi
was. I mean, this has all come out now with Tom O'Neill and the book Chaos.
Right. Yeah.
So all these things, like, it's like pieces of it's like an edifice crumbling. Sorry, my cat is destroying. Hey, listen, stop with he's pushing his head into a lamp. Stop. Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
In other words, the whole thing about I don't want to be crazy, but if you look at the founding doctrine theories, they're crazy. A lot of them, I think.
Right. Yeah, these really big. Well, it's the bigger. I mean, the bigger lie, right? Isn't that the thing? Like the big lie. The big lie is easier than the small lie because if the bigger the lie, the easier it is to tell. Actually, because the fewer people, it's so profound that the fewer people are going to want to.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to question it because then it's just so uncomfortable for them to question these really, really big things.
Yeah. I know it's interesting which ones we adhere to. Like, do you have any? I hate the word conspiracy theory, but
Yeah.
for now, do you have any conspiracy theories that you personally ever got obsessed by or very interested in? Or
Well, COVID. I mean, COVID, I was very much not like I was completely against the narrative of COVID in every way. And like
now, what was it
masks.
like that made you like that? What was it? And was there anyone near you who wasn't like
Oh,
that?
yeah. Are you kidding? Everybody. I mean, 1-2 punch combo, Trump, COVID. I pretty much lost like 85% of the people in my life, like 90.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I don't
Yeah.
talk to 9 out of 10 of people that I
No,
used to
it's
talk to
painful.
before those
I
things.
know you're like all of
Yeah.
us. Painful.
Yeah.
It's like it's different from death. Like if everyone died of like bubonic plague, sorry,
It would
that's
be
a
better.
germ disease, like we would mourn them and miss them,
Right.
understand they were dead. But it's like they're dead because we don't talk. No one
Yeah.
calls. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing that I don't think has ever happened. That they did pulled levers and made sure everybody lost 85% of their friends.
Yeah.
I don't have a single friend in Sweden anymore. I don't have one person who I could call up if I went home to Sweden. But that's
Wow.
not just COVID or AIDS or that's all. That's the whole EU globalist
Right.
immigration, you name it.
Yeah,
I mean,
immigration, right, right. And
we,
as you said, it comes down to in their minds, it's you're killing people. You are killing people. You know, your posts questioning COVID, the COVID narrative are you are killing people. You know, and I got a lot of that. I mean, it took me about 10 years of time to just let all those people go. You know, but after I did let them go, my life got a lot better. You know,
yeah.
I just stopped caring, and I was like, all right,
You were
well,
like out of the closet in favor of Trump and
oh yeah, in 2016, and you should see. So I went to law school. This is what I remember the most after he won. It was so different then because there was still the guise that we lived in a society that had two sides, and we still sort of had this pretend idea that oh yeah, in the workplace, there's a bunch of conservatives and there's also a bunch of liberals. And isn't it funny that they co-work together? And it's like, that was how it was before Trump. People forget that. You know, like you could have voted for George Bush. You wouldn't have gotten fired. Nobody would have been like that mad at you, you know? But that all changed with Trump. And I was living under the old way. I was thinking like, oh, you know, hey, I can vote for whoever you want. It's America. We're all in it together. Who really cares? Yeah, we can disagree. But I learned very quickly that was not true.
no,
You know,
he
you
was
weren't
not
allowed to do
like
it.
a
Yeah.
Republican
Yeah.
candidate. He was
Right.
Trump, the monster. He
Yeah.
wasn't like a Reagan or a Bush or a Bush
Right.
number two. No, he was. They they branded him. Didn't they brand him with that? Because he wasn't branded like that before. I'm from New York, and
Yeah.
he
Oh
was
yeah.
Trump, like the
Yeah.
builder, who everybody knew Trump, but he wasn't Hitler.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, because he was a real, actual, genuine outsider, right? I mean, I think that's really what it was, is he was not pre-approved. He did not have the coalition behind him of people that were on the inside. He also pissed everybody off in New York. Remember, like he kind of was a huge outsider in the New York real estate community. Like he was always pissing people off and being a maverick, and you know he's always been kind of a class defector of his class.
Yeah. Yes, and this is a
yeah.
class war, utterly a class war. Like I got so fed up with it all that a few years ago, I was sitting next to this lady on a plane coming, no, it wasn't that long ago, coming back from Spain. So maybe a year ago. And she was Finnish and she was an academic and she and her husband taught at Yale. And I thought, oh, here it comes. And she started in about how much she hates Trump. And I didn't fight back. It's not good to do on an airplane.
Yeah, you're stuck. Yeah,
But I
you can't
had
go
this
anywhere.
thing, when you think of what you wish you could have said, I thought of it afterwards, like, I wish and I wanted to, here's my line. Sorry, I'm not rich enough to hate Trump.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and right, it was a total class. It was a total
The
class thing.
richer people are, the more
yeah.
they hate him.
No,
It's
100%. Well, right, and it's because look, you really can't blame him, right? Because he is a threat to their power. I mean, at the end of the day, he actually is a real threat to their power because he's not one of them. I mean, he is not one of their people. So he was threatening to them, and they completely threw every single possible thing they could at him, including trying to kill him. But they failed, and
It's-
thank God.
absolutely astounding, this whole thing. It's astounding. I want to ask you, if you don't want to talk about this right now, you'll tell me, but I know you've worked a lot with branding and the whole thing of like right-wing branding and why they don't. So what do you see in MAGA branding that you either love or hate or would like to change? It's probably a big subject, right?
So yeah, I write about this a lot. I mean, it's very interesting, the MAGA red to me. Why is MAGA red and why is communism red?
And in Europe, red means communism.
Exactly. And generally red, and it's funny because the Democrats used to be red in America because they were like labor. They were more like communisty, right?
Yeah, what
And yeah,
happened? That's
well,
so-
it was really funny, right? The more power the Dems got, the more blue they became because blue is authority and red is like the inflammation. It's like the complaint. Red is complaint, blue is authority, right? So
That's
it's like they flipped.
amazing.
Yeah, I just wrote a thing about this in the Frontier
Oh, I
magazine.
gotta read
But
that. Oh,
but anyway, I mean, yeah, MAGA red so my friend Sean Monahan, who's a great trend forecaster, he has this whole thing about the boom boom aesthetic that's coming in, and it's kind of like New York City 80s, very vaguely Trumpy Wall Street, sort of soft light, nighttime office building kind of vibe. And I think that Trump himself, not the greatest taste, right? But I think that, and MAGA in general, like, like it's fine. But he certainly captured something, and those hats are great. The hats are genius. I've always loved the hats, especially the original hats that had the like kind of nautical rope on them. Like they were those hats. The little rope that like kind of vaguely nautical hats have. That was
yeah,
the original MAGA hat. So.
yeah.
He really captured something with that hat, and so I kind of like it. I like the MAGA brand. I think it'll be interesting to see how it evolves though now,
Yeah, I mean, okay, like what do you think of when you looked at, for example, not the inauguration, what was it? Maybe it was, I just remember, so like when they do their whole production and the music and the performances and stuff like that, I feel like that's where I can get kind of critical because I feel like they're just calling it in.
Well, it was funny when they sung Ave Maria. Did you see that? Like in the middle of a rally, the guy sang Ave Maria, which was really, they had like an opera singer. And I think, for
I
culture
think the
people.
inauguration music was really bad. I guess I'm more like the whole world is through my hearing, and I listened, but I thought the music at the inauguration was terrible.
Well, for culture people, both of us started out writing like, in culture magazines. Obviously, it's all a little cringe, I think, for people like us, right? I mean, it's like always going to be a little bit like, ugh, some of that stuff. But
Yeah. Are you calling me a hipster? Because
yeah,
I'm not a hipster. I'm super,
yeah.
but I know
Well,
what you mean. Like
yeah.
in the whole Foo Fighters thing, I guess this is sort of my spin roots, rock roots coming out. But I also have beef with the Foo Fighters. But when they chose that Foo Fighters song. The Foo Fighters actually used to be AIDS dissidents, but
Really?
never mind. Yeah.
Wow. The Foo Fighters were? How did that? What was that? What
Very
happened
much
with
so.
that?
Their bass player, Tyler, what's his name?
I don't know.
No, wait, the drummer who died was Taylor Hawkins, but they have their bass player is maybe also something like that. Probably. Anyway, the bass player had read Duisberg, read Christine Majori, the late Christine Majori, got to be friends with her. They did a benefit concert for Alive and Well, the biggest AIDS dissident in the world, Christine Majori, who later died, but not of AIDS, but the media said it was AIDS. And this would take me a very long time to explain. But so they were absolutely dissidents. They were committed dissidents in the late 90s and public and doing interviews about it. And I got involved with this thing. It was called Rock the Boat. It was actually my invention. And it was a flop. It was a huge flop because we were going to do a big concert in Miami, headlined by the Foo Fighters, and it was to cast a spotlight on subjects darkened by media censorship, which was a great idea, right? But we got completely railroaded, and the Foo Fighters management pulled them out at the last minute, and the whole thing imploded like a week before. And we had all these hotel rooms. Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible.
When was this?
This was in the year 2000.
Well, Dave Grohl became totally.
They really messed us up. They were just total. And then after that, I saw it happen right after that. It was as though there was some kind of deal or discussion, because suddenly their song won a Grammy, and then they went.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, Dave Grohl completely became one of these regime mouthpieces. Like they had something on him, or they gave him some kind of deal, because suddenly he's in every ad, and now he's totally one of those guys. Like anytime there's some stupid thing,
insufferable.
Yeah, and now it's like COVID concert. It's Dave Grohl, and Dave Grohl's talking about racism. You know, it's like they got him.
Bono, right?
Yeah.
Bono, the American Sting. That was before Bono. We had Sting.
Well, but Bono, it seems like it's genuine. I don't know if they actually got anything on Bono, right? But Dave Grohl seems completely manufactured. Like they gave him some kind of money deal or something. I feel like, or they have some compromise on him. It's you know.
Did you see the clip I posted it the other day of Bob Geldof, where he's freaking out about Doge and Musk and Trump, and he's saying to this interviewer that these guys are literally taking food out of starving children. You got to hear it. I'll send it to you. And ripping the bandages off the gang rape. They keep saying literally. And I was like, oh my God, you're insane. You're insane.
Literally ripping the bandages off the gangrene. I haven't heard that one yet.
No.
Yeah. Rip it off the gangrene child. We need that bandage. No, they are getting.
Bob Geldof, mind you, it had to be ripping it off the gang raped women.
Oh, sorry, it's the gang raped women. Sorry,
and that's weird though. Gang raped women by whom? Like who?
They're
what?
Ripping bandage off of gang raped women.
Do you mean London? What do you mean?
Yeah, right, exactly, because that's where the gang rapes are going on. They can't say that. Are you getting the sense? I'm getting the feeling that. We're in the eye of a hurricane right now. And like, we kind of like, you know, Trump won, we got to the place we're in, everything's kind of like eerily quiet. And you get the sense that this guy just got killed, the journalist for InfoWars, and they don't say how or why. Did they say why?
No, but yeah, I mean, as you know, he was on the Zelensky hit list, so I'm going to present for now. That was why, but
yeah, they were on. So what was that hit list that you published a thing on this? What was that hit list?
The Zelensky militants put out an actual hit list that you could find on the internet with, I don't know how many, but I want to say at least 20, like Western journalists, influencers, people like Gonzalo Lira, I think Eva Karina Bartlett was on it. Anybody who was like pretty high profile exposing Ukraine lies all the time in social media or media, that's who was on that list. So I know there was a list. I saw it.
Yeah, no, you published a screenshot of it. So yeah, yeah.
So, and we could find it again. But I was surprised. Had you heard of this? I hadn't heard of this journalist. I
No,
watch wars from time to time, but I was very surprised that he would have been on that list.
yeah, I don't know. I didn't. I've never heard of that guy before, so I have no idea like what he was talking about or anything. But that felt really dark. The whole it feels like we're going into this like, it seems like the Blob, the Borg, they're gonna do really really bad stuff. Like that's the kind of sense.
Exactly what I was afraid of, because when we got all kind of Velvet Revolution happy over the last couple of months, and I was at the Velvet Revolution in Prague, at the Berlin Wall, I totally have that in my whole soul, like freedom. But then this part of me was going, but what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
And now it's upon us. Now it's upon us. I feel like that this is sort of New World Order. That's how I would phrase it, chaos theory. Like they want total chaos.
Yeah, and the market, right? I mean, they can feasibly sink the market, if they want, at some degree. They can just stop buying stocks, more or less, which is, it seems like what they're doing. And yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's definitely a scary time. Do you have any predictions of what's going to happen in the coming years?
Let's see. I want to predict that the EU will, as we say, collapse, because I'm very, very opposed to the EU. I think it's a horrific, dangerous monster. That NATO. I want to see the NATO and the EU brought down, and I think the only way that can happen is economically. My understanding is if they can't get Trump and America into this war, then they will collapse economically, because the war is a financial animal, and it's to bolster the EU and the UK.
Right. Yeah.
Actually. That's my understanding of the actual situation, to penetrate the ostensible situation. So in terms of a prediction, let me think for a minute. You mean big picture, like will we have World War III? I think they want to project war in the simulation more than they want to have. I'm talking nuclear war, and I know some people say nuclear weapons don't exist either. I just want to acknowledge that. I don't know. But I feel right now, honestly, like everything is being manipulated by the blob to become more and more chaotic and impossible. For example, Elon Musk does this Doge stuff with Trump, and we're all thinking, oh, look at all that corruption. And we're thinking that's what's not bigger word than corruption, right? Huge amounts, colossal amounts of money. We think that's what's going to happen. Oh, these people are going to be exposed. But instead, everything, like I told you when I wrote my article for Harper's, it wasn't about the crimes. It was about Harper's had to become the story. So now the story is how much everyone hates Elon Musk.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And in Sweden, they're giving away their Tesla cars, and they're setting fires, and
they're trying to say, let's kill billionaires, right? They're trying to say, let's kill billionaires, and they mean Elon Musk. They don't mean Larry Fink, of course. But yeah, they're trying. They're definitely going
blood in the
dark.
snow. I feel like there's like Chekhov's, rifle on the wall. I feel like everything is very charged right now. I wish I could say otherwise. It doesn't feel like everyone's kind of settling in and figuring out work on the next election. It feels like, the EU is very dark right now.
Yeah.
And with the slaughters in Syria, I mean, staggering. I have no words for that, and for the fact that the EU is funding it and aiding and abetting it. Like nothing is recognizable anymore.
Yeah, the
mask is off, and I almost wish the mask would go back on.
Yeah, because then at least they'd have to it's like in unmasking them in a way, we've kind of given them they're like, all right, well, now I don't have to pretend to not be a monster anymore, do I? Did you see on Substack, great example, USAID has a Substack. Did you see that? It's called Friends of USAID. And they're blogging. They're like, every week we're going to publish an example of why USAID. The really interesting thing is they're not saying good. Formerly, the tale would have been, we're charitable. We're saving the poor, atheists, transgender atheists of, Bahrain from the evil, Muslims that are trying to kill them. Or, the real thing they were doing is in Nepal, the Hindus are killing the atheists. We got to save the atheists. Before they would have said, we're helping the little guy. Now on Substack, they say, USAID isn't charity. It's a strategic move. So now they're just owning it. Now they're just saying, okay, yeah, you can see it on Substack.
They're blobbing out. They're blobbing.
Yeah, they're just like, all right, well, we're crazy evil.
A friend of mine calls what you're talking about, he calls it the CIA beachhead on Substack, but really it's the blob beachhead. They're all over Substack, which is another conversation, like, is that why Substack gets to exist?
Well, we got to worry about that. I think Substack, the leadership though, has been really smart. And I think, how they've been so smart. And it's because they're really, really ultra lean. They make so little money. Substack makes like very little money a year.
What?
Yeah. So the total revenue of Substack, I think a couple years ago, was like 17 million. I've worked for small agencies that make more money than that. So they're really, really lean. So they haven't allowed themselves to become too much of a target yet, I don't think. And yeah, the sense you get is, you're right. The sense you get is like the blob is going to try to work with Substack versus trying to kill it. Because I think they've also kind of learned their lesson in trying to kill platforms. I think they've realized they can't kill them anymore because it just doesn't work. Because another one's going to pop up and, everybody's going to just move to wherever the next one is. And so I think now it's going to be about trying to, conquer the Substack platform via... But they're not going to be able to do it because nobody wants to see their stupid Substack articles anyway. So, we'll see.
Do you think that mainstream media, let's just talk about print media, is going to die, like New York Times, Washington? Who's going to read that stuff when the boomer essentially generation actually dies?
Right. I still like reading. I still get two print. I get the New Yorker and the Wall Street Journal in print. But, I'm kind of old. So... the young guys, they don't read anything in print ever. Will print survive? Of course it'll survive, right? Theater survived. It still exists. Nobody sees it, but it exists.
Suddenly thinking about this question, like the iconic, big fat Sunday Times, the physical New York Times. If you think about 20 years from now, who's going to be able to read, who will exist to read that? If any of us indeed exist.
It'll be like a novelty, it'll be like a novelty thing. It'll be like, that people kind of cling on to and they like. And all those places, I think there's only, of all the print magazines that still exist, only a couple of them are real businesses. I think the New York Times is a real business. The New Yorker is probably a real business. But after that, Harper's is not real. That's MacArthur, right? That's the MacArthur Foundation. They don't need to make money.
It turned really woke, didn't it, in recent years? I haven't looked at it in ages. You said you subscribe to the New Yorker. How is the New Yorker?
It's horrible. It's so bad. It's unbelievably bad. I'm just punishing myself. Yeah, it's like I read it and I'm just like, this infuriates me. But I keep doing it. Why? I don't know. Okay, Celia, thank you so much. This was really, really great. Yeah, you are awesome. Everybody should subscribe to your Substack. What is the name of the Substack one more time?
It's called The Truth Barrier, and the address is celiafarber.substack.com. I had such a blast talking to you. And, I'll send you some people who can give you really scientific answers about PCR, as I said, if you want. I have a whole bunch of friends they think about nothing but sure. I'm a little over it all.
No, for sure. Yeah, I'll do a whole PCR episode.
Jumbo, but
well, thank you so much for fighting the good fight. And we'll talk to you soon. I'm going to click the end music now. And okay. I'll DM you on Twitter.
To be continued. Bye,
Okay,
Isaac.
bye.
Bye.